It is Monday, October 30th. We have an 11-game NBA DFS slate, and I'm about to break it all down from both a DraftKings and a FanDuel perspective. Going to do a quick video here highlighting some top projected lineups as well as the individual players that I think make for the best options at the first look in the morning. The only thing I ask from you guys is do me a favor, like, follow, subscribe. All that is very much appreciated. It's only going to take a half second of your time, and it helps keep all of the content that we do over at Stokastic.com free. And if you want to sign up for our NBA package, now is the time to do it. We have our tip-off promo for 20% off, and that is going to be expiring soon. So it's the last call to sign up and get access to all of our Sims tools for 20% off. And that is what I am going to be using for my analysis here. So I built lineups out in the contest generator for DraftKings and for FanDuel. I've run the DK lineups through the Sims tool. After I review DraftKings, I'm going to plug the FanDuel lineups in and we'll simulate those out as well. But here's where we're going to start. I'm going to favorite my top 150 lineups here. So I built out lineups in the contest generator. They played against each other 40,000 times in the Sims tool. And from there, this is the lineup that came away with the highest simulated ROI. It is Trae Young, Spencer Dinwiddie, Royce O'Neal, Jalen Johnson, who started over Saddiq Bey last night and looks like one of the better value options on tonight's slate on DraftKings. There isn't a ton of value to be had. Even though it's 11 games, there aren't that many players who are on the injury report or been ruled out. We do have the Nets situation with no Cam Johnson or Nick Claxton. But other than that, not really too much to speak of as far as value goes. So Jalen Johnson, one of the top standouts on DK, Andre Drummond, Damian Lillard, Zaire Williams, and then Jalen Duren. So we are definitely going to want to check back, as per usual, with DraftKings and FanDuel with NBA DFS later on the day, just to be sure that no other injury news drops. I'll be on Live Before Lock tonight with Eric Lindquist breaking it down with more information that we might have later on the day. But as of now, this is my highest projected lineup. If we go and look at exposures, we will go position by position and see who looks the best at each spot. Starting with the point guards. Point guard getting the most exposure to is Spencer Dinwiddie, and this gets back to the Nets. No Nick Claxton and also no Cam Johnson for today. And one thing that we saw the Nets do last game is even though we had just heard from the team that they're rarely going to be playing players 30-plus minutes per game, they're going to be running a deep rotation. Not so fast, because last game, which was only the second game of the season, so after the first game, team talks about how players' minutes are going to be limited, and they ran a very tight rotation for the second game of the season. We saw big minutes to all the starters. So Spencer Dinwiddie looking good at point guard, also getting exposure here to Kobe White, Cam Thomas. So Cam Johnson, with him being out last game, we saw Cam Thomas move into the starting lineup. And when Cam Thomas is on the court, he shoots. He doesn't really have a lot of other dimensions to his game. He's really only a scorer, but he takes a lot of shots. He's a high usage guy. If he's going to be locked into big minutes, he makes sense. And then Ben Simmons, also somebody who I know that in general, not a lot of people love clicking on Ben Simmons' name, but he's a good fantasy producer. His price point is relatively cheap. He's a well-rounded game. He doesn't score much, but he gives us rebounds. He gives us assists. He gives us defensive stats. And he's only projected for 11% ownership in the morning. So I like getting overweight to the field here on Ben Simmons. Also really good positional eligibility, point guard and small forward. So I assume that we're going to see quite a bit of him when we get to small forward as well, in terms of him being one of our most roster players at the position. Shooting guard, a lot of the same. Dinwiddie and Cam Thomas also shooting guard eligibility. Brandon Ingram also making it into nearly 20% of lineups, but more or less what he's projected for. He's projected for 18.9% ownership. Small forward, what is standing out here? Royce O'Neal. So I'm just getting to all of the Nets exposure, apparently, which, once again, this is a result of there being limited value on the slate, the Nets being one of the only injured spots. So therefore, this is the value we're getting to, is on the Brooklyn Nets. And then the other small forwards we're getting to here, Kyle Kuzma, who should start to see a price uptick fairly soon. The only guys that could really take up any kind of usage for the Wizards are Kyle Kuzma and Jordan Poole. We do also have Daniel Gafford on the injury report, one of the lone players who is currently questionable to play. If he's out, that's going to create more rebounding opportunities for the Wizards, and then could also end up making more value in the front court for Washington. Also, Ben Simmons, Brandon Ingram, other players that we've already talked about that have small forward eligibility. Power forwards. I'm getting to the most of on DK. Jalen Johnson, talked about him at the top. I expect him to continue to start over Saddiq Bey. Got into a little bit of foul trouble last night, Jalen Johnson, but really good points from a fantasy producer when he was on the court. Dorian Finney-Smith, hey, another Nets player, making it into lineups here. And then Isaiah Stewart, who has power forward and center eligibility. And we've seen a lot of centers just priced too cheaply on DK to open up the year. Center spot, who is standing out the most? A little bit spread out here. The most roster one is Isaiah Stewart, but that's partly because he's the power forward and center eligibility. Behind him, we're getting to Vooch, Jalen Duren, Onyeka Okongwu, Nikola Jokic, really spread out. Only two players with center eligibility in north of 20% of lineups. And there's 12 guys here so that we have 12% or more exposure to. So Duren, Okongwu, Jokic, Portis, Drummond, Valanciunas, Naz Reid, Anthony Davis, Karl Anthony Towns, all players were getting into lineups. As far as centers go, it's not a spot where there's one clear option that stands out above the rest, although that could change if something happens like Day'Ron Sharpe starts for the Nets, or if something was to happen like Daniel Gafford being ruled out and a cheap starting center coming into play for the Wizards. So that is everything that I'm getting to as far as most roster players position by position for DraftKings. Now let's simulate lineups out for FanDuel. And I've got my CSV here. Let's see, which one is it? I think it's this one. Let's see if that's correct. Nope, not that one. Was it this CSV file? Oh, no, it's this one. This CSV file. There we go. It helps the name stuff sometimes, so it's not just something generic that you don't know what you're clicking on. But either way, we got that past me here. Simulating out the FanDuel lineups now, and we'll see what ends up looking different on FanDuel relative to DraftKings, at least so far in the first week of the season. I think FanDuel's done a better job of pricing than DraftKings. DraftKings has left a lot of players like $1,000, $1,500 too cheap, whereas FanDuel, that hasn't been the case. And then also the studs have been more expensive on FanDuel. So typically in previous years, we've seen the pricing be a lot softer on FanDuel. So far, not the case so far this year, but we'll see what ends up popping up really for tonight's slate. As far as the big contest on FanDuel tonight, it is not quite as big as the contest on DK, but still pays out $50K to first place. Yeah, $50K to first place, whereas FanDuel, whereas DraftKings paying out $100,000 to first. But let's go and favorite the top 150 lineups on FanDuel. And the number one overall projected lineup that I have right here for FanDuel: Trae Young, Jamal Murray, Tyrese Halliburton, Kobe White, Zach LaVine, Gordon Hayward, Bobby Portis, Royce O'Neal, and Brooke Lopez. So that is a lineup that is not projected to be duped, but I have a feeling a couple of people, probably more than a couple, will watch this video and then will end up playing that lineup. But currently is the number one projected ROI lineup for me. Exposures, same deal, going position by position to see what stands out for FanDuel, starting with the point guards. We're getting to a lot of the same players that we saw pop up on DK. Spencer Dinwiddie, Kobe White. But in addition to them, we've got Drew Holiday, Kyrie Irving, who has been priced pretty modestly on both FanDuel and DraftKings, but we know there's a clear upside to Kyrie Irving. I think his salary is about fair for his median outcome, but what's going to happen a lot of times is either going to fall well short of salary expectations or way exceed them, because Kyrie Irving, we've just seen him be kind of a high variance player, particularly in Dallas, where he takes a backseat to Luka Doncic. And it's going to be hard to pay up for the most expensive studs on today's slate unless more value opens up. So I do like some of these secondary stars like Kyrie Irving, and then Jamal Murray and Ben Simmons, also 20+% owned players that I'm getting to here on FanDuel at point guard. Shooting guards, getting to a lot of Dinwiddie, Kobe White again, Jalen Williams. He's a little bit too cheap on FanDuel, whereas he's more appropriately priced on DraftKings. So he's been a chalkier play through a couple of the OKC's opening games. He's projected for 41.1% ownership, but more or less looks warranted when I'm getting to in 45.3% of lineups. And then also getting to Mikal Bridges, Zach LaVine, and also Kyrie Irving at the shooting guard spot. Small forwards that I'm getting the most exposure to, some familiar names: Royce O'Neal, brought up, how many Nets players at this point? Jalen Williams, Paulo Banchero. Banchero's another guy who's been priced a little bit too cheap on FanDuel. They've left him in like that mid 7K range on most slates, which I expect him to be somebody who's going to be priced closer to 9K on FanDuel by the end of the season. Banchero had a great rookie year, and I think we're going to see improvements in his second season to make him a better fantasy producer. So a little bit too cheap, in my opinion, to open up the year. And then Brandon Ingram, Mikal Bridges, and Zach LaVine, the other players I'm getting to 20+% of with shooting guard eligibility. And it's funny, LaVine was a really chalky play the first couple of slates of the year. And then what ended up happening with Zach LaVine, a couple of chalky games, shits the bed in them. Everybody gets off him. Then last game, he's 2% on and just goes absolutely nuts. Zach LaVine was dealing with a back injury to open up the year. He looked fine to me last game, though. So still like getting to Zach LaVine. Power forwards now. Once again, Royce O'Neal, Bobby Portis, who's showing up a lot as a contrarian play. Bobby Portis only projected for 8% ownership and getting to nearly 60% of lineups. So if you're looking for a contrarian play on FanDuel, Bobby Portis looks like your guy. Something else of note, the Bucks are playing on the tail end of a back-to-back. Maybe that means Giannis, Dame, core players, maybe they play a couple extra or a couple less minutes, which would lead to Bobby Portis playing a bigger role. Paulo Banchero, we're getting to Zion in 32% of lineups on FanDuel, and then Ben Simmons again. So Zion only projected for 15% ownership. He looks like another one of those secondary type studs to get overweight to the field too. Kind of in the similar vein with Kyrie Irving, really wide range of outcomes for Zion, but a very, very clear ceiling that he has. And if we're going to struggle to get up to the likes of like the Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic type of players on this slate, well, then we end up on the secondary tier fantasy stars like Zion and like Kyrie Irving. So like paying up for them today. And then at center, once again, a lot of Bobby Portis. He's power forward and center eligibility. Then Brook Lopez and Nikola Vucevic rounding out the other players we're getting to over 20% of on FanDuel. So there's a roundup of the first look of both DraftKings and FanDuel. If you guys like this content, do me a favor, follow. Like the content also. Like it if you're watching on Twitter or on YouTube. Hit that like button. And then also, if you're looking to sign up for our NBA package, which includes our contest generator, so you can build all your lineups on our site, Sims tools, so you can have them all play against each other to sort and find out which lineups are actually the best. Sign up using that link below. Promo code TIPOFF, 20% when you sign up for the first time. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Good luck with all your lineups. And tonight, I will be on NBA Live before lock with Eric Lindquist at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So check that out if you want more updated information from us.